Welcome Classic Rock Bands to another top 10 list, and this is 10 bands I just absolutely hate. I mean, hate's a strong word. I mean, bands I can't stand, maybe. And yes, this video to some extent is clinging to the coattails of Andy Edwards, who's already done this. But I thought it was such a capital idea, I thought I'd weigh in myself. Number 10 for me is Radiohead. Plaudits are rained down upon this band. But I kind of lost interest in their music years ago. I think The Bends was the finest album they ever did. In fact, I think The Bends is one of the finest albums of the 1990s. And OK Computer was another excellent record. But since then, they've lost themselves to this splodge of dull, navel-gazing, whiny albums, like being trapped in a room with an irritating, buzzy thing. And their experimentation with electronic and listening to way too much craft work, in my opinion, and New and bands like that. But to me, it sounded like 40 minutes of compressed cyborg farts. No doubt appealing to these cheroot-smoking, polar-neck tosspots that prop up student bars brandishing a well-thumbed copy of Existentialism is a humanism. Number 9 is Mike and the Mechanics. I know a lot of you will be upset that I've put them on this list, but to me they're kind of chinoed, trite dad rock. It's like Genesis at their very, very worst, but on steroids. Even mentioning their name feels with a compulsion to hold your lighter aloft and sway it in unison with everybody else. For me, this is banal music for people who can't make up their mind what to listen to. I mean, Paul Carrack had a wonderful voice, but I actually prefer his solo stuff than the stuff he did with Mike and the Mechanics. This is fairly accessible AOR pop, really, for estate agents, cardi wearers, and those that subscribe to Angling Times. Overall, a few good numbers, but generally just contributing to that oceanic soup of bland, forgettable music. And whilst we're talking about bland, forgettable music, number 8 is Coldplay. This band are about as appealing as a cold bucket of sick, with Chris Martin mewing away and Pearl clutching under some banner like Amnesty International or something like that. I often wonder if I actually hate this band, or maybe I'm just disappointed in them, a bit like Radiohead. I mean, Parachutes I thought was quite a good album, as was Rush of Blood to the Head. Over time it's just become shallower, repetitive, cookie-cutter, bromidic dross, aiming for that mass pop stadium appeal. I mean, arguably they're a good live band, but creatively their music is about as appealing as an arse cheese souffle. Number 7 is the Dave Matthews Band. To paraphrase the Bill Murray film, What About Bob? He says the world is divided into two types of people, those that like the Dave Matthews Band and those that don't. But I have to say this band do sell an awful lot of concert tickets, so somebody must like them. But to me this music is uninspired and derivative, blending folk, jazz and rock without being particularly interesting in either one of them. One critic has said they're just a product of clever marketing over artistic intent. I think their audience is kind of made up of the fair old sweated version of Nickelback fans. Number 6 is Michael Jackson, the king of pop. I just cannot stand him. To me there's nothing that Michael Jackson does that James Brown couldn't do 10 times better. And what on earth did he do to his face? I mean, he transformed himself into this quite stunning looking young man, into a kind of a menopausal Diana Ross. And of course Thriller was the big album. Everyone had a copy of that in the 1980s. My sister had a copy, in fact. But when I listen to it, I just feel it's a triumph of production over content. And I could certainly do without all that crotch grabbing and squeaking, and I never have to sit any more moonwalking as long as I live. And my God, the Earth song, say no more. And all this before we even touch upon Jacko's problematic relationship with young boys. Number 5 is the Pet Shop Boys, with those bland, droning vocals like a clenched fart, accompanied by that synth-dominated symphonic sweep of awfulness. They represent everything I hate about the 1980s in some respects. Maybe I misunderstand this band, I don't know. And while we're talking about awful 80s music, another band I cannot stand is Spandau Ballet, but I've forgotten to put them on my list. And that's before we even get to that dreadful cover of the Willie Nelson number. If I may quote one article, it says, if a generic dance pop duo decided to make an irritating, irrelevant cover of an overrated country song, a giant hammer should descend from the heavens and smite the fuckers. I think when this band recorded their albums, I think Kmart must have been having a sale on tacky synth modules. Number 4 is Simply Red. This band is simply dull. They make Dire Straits look like Guns N' Roses. Their music is about as promising as a glory hole at a vegan karaoke bar. It's got that awful 1980s slow dance with Tracy feel to it, reminiscent of those office parties with those little cubes of cheese and those mini tandoori skewers. Probably much more satisfying than having to listen to Stars for the umpteenth time. And when Mick Hucknall says ginger vibes are as bad as racism, I don't think they are, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I'm sure Martin Luther King would have touched upon it in that landmark speech of his. Overall, I have to say these guys are about as interesting as a Delamitri tribute band. Number 3 is Ace of Base. My God, do you remember these? It's kind of the ABBA of the 1990s. You had this attractive brunette and 2 guys that nobody can remember. They churned out quite a few really big hit singles. All That You Want, The Sign, Beautiful Life. I mean, they were everywhere. And that is until the decade ended. We were all hungover, wondering what on earth had happened, rushing with arms full of their CDs to the local Oxfam shop. Number 2 is Hansen. These guys sold millions of records, and they were made up of 3 brothers who actually wrote their own material, so credit where credit's due. And I mean, none of us ever tire of listening to that sanitised pop, do we? Apparently they're still around, actually, and have a legion of fans. Those poor deluded souls. Although I think recently the brothers were found to have fairly objectionable stuff on their computer to do with nothing more extremist politics, which a lot of their fans felt they just couldn't forgive them for. Exactly the way I felt after Mbop. Number 1 is Wet, Wet, Wet. I mean, thankfully these gusset sniffers are no longer around. This trite music with this Marty ponytail Pello grinning away like some playground nonce with pockets full of jelly beans. They actually took their name from a Scritti Politti lyric, believe it or not. But I listened to their music, and is it any wonder that Jarvis Cocker, I think, performed on Top of the Pops with I Hate Wet, Wet, Wet on the lapel of his jacket. Not to mention that nauseating cover of that Trogs number. The best cover of that Trogs number, I think, was the R.E.M. Unplugged. I love that version. Apparently Marty Pello is actually a solo artist now. I've never heard any of his solo material. I wonder what sort of genre he's bothering with it. I must admit Marty Pello has an incredible voice. I'll give them that. Although I don't know why I'm trying to rationalise my dislike of this band. Maybe I should just throw it over to you. Is my dislike of this band entirely rational? What do you think? I remember my mother saying, well, they must appeal to all the young ladies out there. Well, the young ladies I spoke to said their snatches slammed shut like a pharaoh's tomb whenever they appeared on Top of the Pops. That was a line filched from Frankie Boyle, by the way. Anyway, there you have it, 10 bands I just cannot stand. Let me know what your list would be. Leave your comments below. It's always interesting to hear from you. Other than that, please be sure to click like, subscribe, check that notification bell, and all that stuff. And I'll just leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.